I'm going to do a quick reaction video to a press conference held this morning. One of the things about Caribbean leaders is that when there's bad news, they don't appear on the scene. They only appear for good things. They would throw others under the bus, in front of the bus when there's bad news. But once there's good news, they appear at the forefront, driving the bus. So one of the first things I noticed about this press conference, the Prime Minister was not there as head of the National Security Council to even say, look, hey, Trinidad and Tobago, we've got a problem, we got to fix it. He wasn't there. So that's the first thing I saw this morning that was just off for me. And if I were a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, I'd realize immediately that my Prime Minister really is not who I expect him to be. That's just my thinking. You can leave your comment in the section below because this one is. So with that being said, let's listen to what the Attorney General had to say. It was very, very instructive.
As you may be aware, so far as at the time we had to give consideration this morning as to what was taking place in Trinidad and Tobago, there were 61 homicides for the month of December. 61 homicides, approximately 623 homicides for the year. However, the focus of homicides and this murder rate is not the main reason why the decision was taken to call this state of emergency.
So let's stop right here. So 61 murders for the month so far, 600 and counting for the entire year. And that was not the reason really to call a state of emergency or to say, look, we're into a state of emergency. So the lives lost in the government mind, maybe it's not enough that have died to call a state of emergency. There wasn't enough murders, not enough mothers losing sons, not enough husbands losing wives or wives losing husbands or mothers losing daughters and sons and girlfriends losing boyfriends or boyfriends losing girlfriends, aunts losing whatever, cousins and this and that. That was not enough to call a state of emergency in Trinidad and say, let's fix this problem. So 61 in this month and 600 and counting was not enough to call a state of emergency. Maybe they needed 700, maybe 800, maybe 900, and then say, okay, well, let's call it now because we're closing into the 1,000. So that's the other thing I noticed this morning. I tell you, politicians are some people that are different class altogether. But let's continue listening to
Over the last month or so, and in fact, building up to this, the government has been concerned about the use of high-powered illegal firearms, high-caliber firearms, including automatic weapons that unfortunately are scourged throughout the whole Caribbean region. And due to the high velocity and high caliber weapons, the 5.56 and the 7.62 caliber weapons, you're seeing that when the miscreants in our society, the criminal element, are utilizing these types of weapons, the AR-15s, the AK-47s, and indiscriminately shooting at persons, sometimes missing their targets and hitting innocent bystanders, there is very little chance of survival due to the velocity and the caliber of these weapons. This has been a major concern, not only for us here in Trinidad and Tobago, but throughout the whole CARICOM region. In the last 48 hours, there was firstly, and where I'm focusing on, are two incidents that were drawn to our attention, and Minister Hines will get into some level of detail at the end. You will recall that on Saturday, just after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, outside of the Besson Street Police Station, there was a shooting with the use of a high-caliber automatic weapons. 5.56 shells were recovered afterwards, where one person at the end of it, right outside the Besson Street Police Station, lay dead, and another escaped an attempt on his life, that person being Calvin Lee, who is well known to the law enforcement agencies of Trinidad and Tobago. Within 24 hours thereafter, there was an incident that took place up in Laventille in the Prisgar lands of Laventille, where 6 people were targeted and shot, 5 of whom were then deceased, 1 on the scene and 4 others at the Port of Spain General Hospital a short while later. all intelligence and the information provided to us by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is this was a reprisal shooting, and that there can be expected heightened reprisal activities by the criminal elements in and around certain places in Trinidad and Tobago that immediately warranted and took us out of what we can consider the norm. So in a nutshell, what we were faced with is a decision being provided with the information by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service that there was going to be heightened criminal activity with the expected use of high-powered caliber, high-velocity assault weapons in reprisal attacks between gangs. As we now all know, in these types of incidents, very often, too often for us as a government, innocent people would be affected. As a result of that, and after very careful consideration, the decision was taken by the National Security Council and then transmitted to Her Excellency the President, calling for the declaration and the proclamation of a state of emergency.
All right, so let's recap because that was a mouthful. So tons of AR rifles are in Trinidad, of all kinds of AR rifle. So tons of it in Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad do not produce guns. The Attorney General did not say where they were coming from, if they were coming through the ports, if they were coming through the airports, if they were coming through, inlets, different coastline areas where they're not monitoring. He didn't say anything. So first of all, we don't know where these guns are coming from. We know that they're in Trinidad, and that's it. We just know that they're in Trinidad. I mean, like hundreds of them basically are in Trinidad, right? Maybe thousands of them are in Trinidad. One of the most vicious kind of guns you can think about, dangerous kind of guns you can think about in Trinidad. Didn't mention where they were coming from, so that's another failure right there. The other thing he said was that there were going to be reprisals by gangs using these high-powered rifles in different areas of Trinidad and Tobago. Didn't mention the areas. So if you're living in the south, if you live in the east or the west, you're not sure what's going to be happening in your area because the Attorney General didn't say so. But I think that it is high time that the government of Trinidad and Tobago be open with the people. Look, say, look, in the south, it appears there's going to be calamity. We all got to prepare ourselves. Lock our doors early. The police will be on the streets more. Protect yourself however you can. But no, they're still saying we're not going to say anything. We're just knowing that these guys are going to do reprisals with these high-powered rifles. And because of that, we are going to call a state of emergency. So like I said in the opening, it's not because 600 plus people have died. It's not because we had 5 on a massacre in one night. It's not because we had 61 in December. It's not because of all of those lives lost that we're going to have a state of emergency so we could fix the damn issue. It's because these guys are going to be using AR rifles, high-powered rifles that we don't know where they're coming from because he didn't say so. A lot of innocent people, as he said, will get caught up or may get caught up in the crossfire. Maybe people who belong to the government. Maybe people of stature in Trinidad and Tobago may get caught up in the crossfire. So let's call a state of emergency now because we don't want to die in this crossfire. Didn't care about who was dying in the crossfire before, but apparently this kind of retaliation, the kind of people that may die in the crossfire, no, we don't want this. So let's call a state of emergency. Well, I tell you, let's continue. Let's continue.
The TTPS intelligence that was provided to the Minister of National Security, who in turn informed the Minister of National Security, who in turn informed the National Security Council, was that certain criminal gangs, and I will leave out the places where at this stage, but I can say throughout Trinidad and possibly Tobago, are likely to immediately increase their brazen acts of violence in reprisal shootings on a scale so extensive that it threatens persons and will endanger public safety. Accordingly, in those circumstances, the National Security Council was of the considered opinion and considered opinion that it was necessary to advise Her Excellency the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago that a public emergency exists. accordance with Section 8 of the Constitution, which empowers the President to make a proclamation that a public emergency has arisen as a result of action that has been taken. And these are the important words of the Constitution. As a result of action that has been taken or is immediately threatened by any person or persons of such a nature and on so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger public safety. As a result of that, Her Excellency the President took our advice and issued the necessary proclamation.
So, like I said before, they're going to do it all over Trinidad and Tobago, basically. That's what he is saying. The reprisals are going to be all over Trinidad and Tobago. So that's called a state of emergency because we do not know who will get caught up in this crossfire. Again, I will say to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, you mean to tell me that all of the killings that have taken place so far, the people who have been caught up in the crossfire, the innocent people, and all the murders that have taken place so far for the year, 600 plus and counting, it wasn't enough to call a state of emergency to say, well, let's fix this problem. But now gangs are going to retaliate. They're using high-powered rifles, just like they've been using all the time, but all over Trinidad and Tobago. So guess what? It's not in Laventille. It's not in a bad area in Port of Spain anymore. It's all over Trinidad and Tobago, and I may get caught up in the crossfire. Somebody else of my ilk may get caught up in the crossfire and die. So let's call a state of emergency because we must protect ourselves. Not the people of Trinidad and Tobago. We must ensure that we don't die in this crossfire. That's what I'm getting from him. I may be wrong. You can leave your comments in the section below. I may be wrong. I may just be wrong. This just doesn't sound like a government that really cares about fixing this issue. So they're about protecting our people and ensure that we don't die in whatever is to come. You know what I'm saying? That's just how I view it. But let's continue to listen to the the Attorney General, of course, was thrown in front of the bus to take the bus and drive it at this point in time while there are problems and the Prime Minister is nowhere to be found. Adam in the garden hiding. Let's continue.
After the issuance of a proclamation, what then happens in accordance with the law and the Constitution, pursuant to Section 7 of the Constitution, is the publication of regulations that would govern this period. And that is what I'll spend a bit of time informing you all. The regulations have been drafted and in the process of going through the process now, and within an hour or two after the end of this conference will be made public after Her Excellency the President has been presented with them and they are so published. The first thing I'd like to tell you all is that at this stage the government has taken the decision there is not going to be any curfew. That decision is because the targeting of this national public state of emergency is on those who engage in criminal activity with criminal intent of endangering the public safety through the use of these illegal firearms, both high velocity as well as illegal handguns and the other likes. Those are the persons who are being targeted by this state of emergency. So, unlike 1990 and unlike the 2011 state of emergency, this state of emergency at this time will have no curfew. It will also not seek to affect public meetings, public gatherings, excuse me, and public marches.
So let me get something clear. So there'll be no curfew in this state of emergency. It will only be targeting the criminals who are using high-powered rifle and who's going to be doing reprisals. So there's no curfew. So if there's no curfew, this. So let me get this straight. There's going to be no curfew. but you're saying that the state of emergency is going to target the criminals. So are you saying to me and Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Young, that the government knows exactly who these people are, that the government knows where they are, who they are, and if so, why is it that you have not gone after them already and taken them out so we will not have to reach 600 plus and counting for the year, since they're the one carrying out these violent acts in Trinidad and Tobago? The curfew is only going to target them. It's only going to target them. So why not put a curfew where people are off the streets so there'll be no more killing or hardly any at all? But in the meantime, while you have a curfew where you can let people get off the streets, say between 7 and 4 in the morning, and you do your targeting of these criminals between that hour because they'll have no one to kill since no one is on the street. They may have to come to somebody's house, but people will lock up their house. People will be at a heightened state where they'll say, look, somebody may come, so let me protect myself, how I can protect myself. But in the meantime, the government is targeting these people. But there'll be no curfew, so you can move about how you want. So there'll be continued killing, Mr. Young, in your state of emergency. But yet you're saying you're targeting the criminals? So you know who they are. The government knows who these people are. So they've known them since January when they've been taking out people till December, till we got to 600 and something. And now you're telling me that you guys are really, really jokers. Really, really jokers if that is the case. But let me continue listening to Mr. Young, who's the Attorney General, whom Rowley has thrown in front of the bus at this time to take
States
all
of
the blows.
emergency in 1990 and 2011 for some unknown reason did so affect. This state of emergency, I repeat, is being specifically targeted on the criminal elements and their use and their brazen acts, their use of illegal firearms and their brazen acts of violent criminal activity that are affecting not only the gangs but also us, the law-abiding citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. So there is not going to be any curfew. There is not going to be, at this stage, any restriction on public meetings, public marches, or any meetings of that sort. It is going to be specifically targeted to those engaged in criminal activity. You will see, once the regulations are published, that the Commissioner of Police will.
So no curfew. So people continue to roam the streets as they are currently roaming the streets, which means that criminals will continue to roam the streets as they are roaming the streets. See the attackers in the street, continue the killing, while you said that you're going to target those who are using these things. So you know who they are. Let's hope that you get them before they get more people, because really what you're saying and what you're doing makes
Prohibitive
absolutely
powers
no
that she
sense.
can utilize and that will be utilized via order. The police service will be given additional powers because basically a state of emergency is the suspension of certain constitutional rights. The police service will be given the powers to search premises without warrants, to search persons without warrants who they have suspicions of carrying out criminal activities, a lot of it associated with illegal firearms, and also to detain persons for periods of time. The regulations are setting out the process and the procedure. We're going to have a 48-hour holding period where persons can be held under these regulations. Thereafter, either a magistrate or a senior police officer can make an order of detention for another 7 days whilst evidence is being gathered with respect to persons held under the state of emergency regulations.
So the police is going to get extra powers to do certain things. I can guarantee you that while they're saying that there's only certain things they can do, some of these police are going to overshoot their powers that they get, and they're going to go after certain people that they wanted to go after for a very long time, even though you're innocent too. This happens during a state of emergency in all countries, so look out for it in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm just warning you, by the way. I've seen it. I've been in countries where it has taken place already, so I know what I'm talking about. But I really could not listen to any more of what Mr. Young was saying, because to me it doesn't make much of a sense. To me, I get it that Rowley threw you in front of the bus to drive it at this point in time when there's danger ahead, when there's a cliff. He's not there to drive it. Secondly, he was not present at the press conference, which is just wrong. He should have at least come to show his face and say, Trinidad and Tobago, we have a problem, we're going to fix it. But these Caribbean leaders, when there are bad times, they don't show their faces up. Only when something good, they show up their face to say, oh, I'm taking credit for this. But when something bad is happening, you don't see them at all. But that's typical. And they throw other people in front of the bus. Mr. Young said something very, very critical this morning. He said that the state of emergency is going to target the criminals alone, no curfew. So it means from January to December, while these criminals were killing people, it may have been that the government knew who these people are. The TTPS may know who these people are. So why did they not go after them during that time and take them up and do what they wanted to do with them? That's very interesting, Mr. Young. It's very, very interesting. Maybe you should not have said that part, but that's okay. That's okay. That's okay. I really don't know whether or not I want to comment more on this press conference. I think it was not a waste of time, but it may not have reflected what the people of Trinidad wanted to hear, and did not give them much comfort at this time either. So I'm just gonna allow the rest to play, and I'm gonna take
There will
myself from
be,
this
it is
video.
targeting the unlawful possession of firearms, ammunition, explosives. Persons who are found in the company of anyone with these items will also be detained. As I said, there will be the power to stop and search by the police. They will be allowed to enter and search premises, to stop and search any vessel, vehicle, or individual, whether in a public space or not. They will be able to arrest without a warrant any person suspected has acted or is acting or is about to act in a manner prejudicial to public safety or to public order, or to have committed or is committing or about to commit an offense against the regulations. It will also suspend the ability for bail in the circumstances where you're detained under these regulations and the public.
I'm just gonna say finally before I go that if this is a scope of the state of emergency, why didn't the government put in these limited powers since January? Since you're not gonna have a curfew or say that everybody's off the street, why didn't you put these limited powers in act them early since January or even since March when you start seeing a hype in the crime situation and the numbers going up and up? Why didn't you do that? So all of these time you could have been getting people off the street, getting rid of criminals. Why didn't you do it? But you see, the thing is, like I'm saying to you guys, I have a video coming out this evening about this crime in the Caribbean, and you'll understand why after that. But that's all I'm gonna say. You guys remember to comment in the section below, like, share, and subscribe to the video.